My name's Mike Wickett. After 10 years in Milwaukee, this is Wickett on Wisconsin. My name's Mike Wickett. After 10 years in Milwaukee talking sports, I took a bit of a break, but now I'm back and here to talk about the Packers, the Bucks, the Brewers, and more with you. And now inside the Koss Headphone Studios, this is Wickett on Wisconsin with me, Mike Wickett. Hey, welcome in. It's another episode of Wickett on Wisconsin. Coming up, we're going to talk about A.J. Dillon, the new Green Bay Packers running back, and what this means for the future of the Green Bay Packers. After reading and seeing some stuff about Dillon, I'm pretty excited. Normally, this is the time where I welcome in the guest who is going to join me. And this week's guest is the television voice of the Milwaukee Brewers, Brian Anderson. And I'm going to be 100% honest with you. When I recorded my interview with B.A., I didn't hit record until 8 seconds into his first answer. I always say, hey, how are you? Are you being safe? Because I care about our guests' safety and health and their family and whatnot. But I didn't hit record. So what you missed is after I said, are you bored? Are you staying safe? And he said, we're all trying to embrace the suck, which is incredible because BA is one of the most professional broadcasters ever. And I wish I would have had that because it does, suck that this whole thing is going on and we're all trapped inside. But without further ado, here's the rest of Brian Anderson's answer and my interview with B.A. I'm always honest with you guys. Here's Brian Anderson on how he and his family are doing during the pandemic.
Good. Reconnecting with my family, being a part of the home life, especially in the springtime. Memorial Days usually work for me. It's usually a baseball game, a Brewers game, or being on the road. So we've been home all together. My daughter's home from Marquette, so she finished her semester online. She started summer school last week, so she's kind of diving into the whole scholarly thing, which is awesome. She's a great student, and we've just been home together, so everything's good.
Because the other option is you'd be really bored, because you're normally a pretty busy guy in the spring and the summer, and your downtime is generally in the fall once we get past the championship series of baseball. What was it like for you back up 3 months ago when the NCAA, actually maybe even when Rudy Gobert touched the mics and the NBA said we're done, because all of a sudden your calendar opened up?
Yeah, that was all. I was working in that window. So the Tuesday prior to, so this would be March 10th, I was in San Antonio for the NBA on TNT. We did a game there in front of a packed house, sellout crowd at the AT&T Center. Flew to Indianapolis that Wednesday. That was the day Gobert tested positive in Oklahoma City. I was at the Big Ten tournament, so I was ready to call Big Ten tournament play the following day, Thursday at noon. And Fred Hoiberg, you might remember, the head coach of Nebraska, on that Wednesday, he fell ill and left the arena and went to the hospital. Turns out he didn't have coronavirus, but at that time, that kind of set off the wheels that Rudy Gobert's down, the NBA's postponed for now. The Big Ten started to think about what they could do. They were certainly not prepared for a player or a coach to be ill, and they quarantined the Nebraska team. So we sat there. We went on the air actually at 11:30 and 11:30 Eastern. We were ready to call Michigan and Rutgers. We're sitting there at the table. The teams are in the layup lines, and then the officials came over, canceled the game, canceled the tournament, and then I drove home. So I drove from Indianapolis to Milwaukee, and on my drive home, that's when I found out the NCAA tournament was canceled as well. Not postponed, canceled. And then shortly thereafter, baseball. And then it all just kind of came to a standstill. And I've basically been home ever since, other than the 4 days I just spent in Florida to call the match on TNT.
We'll get to that, obviously, because I want to know if Tom Brady really is an 8 handicap after what you saw. But I got to imagine, as a guy who sits at home and watches sports, it was devastating. But as a guy who calls sports, I know you've done probably 50 interviews just like this one on various outlets. What did you think when you pulled into your house in Milwaukee and all of a sudden you're like, well, no more NBA for me for a while, no NCAA, and baseball was still kind of up in the air?
Well, you knew it was going to be a while, so I think that was the first thing that I kind of processed that on the drive home. That's why I wanted to drive and not fly. It was only 5 hours, but it being in the car, some time for reflection. I was talking to some people, and I was a little agitated and upset. And just, when your schedule gets disrupted, you get into that mode. And then about an hour in, I just decided, let's replace the selfish with the service and the selfless. And so I started thinking about things that I could do while we're down, however long we're down. And at the top of that list was be present with my family, be home. My daughter is now home from Marquette, taking online classes. So we can finally, the three of us, I have one child, we can be a family again, we together. And I'm the one who's disrupted that always by traveling and being gone. And there's always that sense of guilt when you're not with your family and you have to travel as much as I do. So I that was at the top of my list. The other was just chores and just things to get done, things that, before I started doing this at this level, I would do myself. And now I have time. So just to give you an example, like, to mow the yard, it was like, well, I got to get things done in an hour because I have so many other things to do. And then I just stopped mowing my yard and have people do it. And it was just great to be able to get around the house and clean out the dryer vent and get my hands dirty and do stuff around the house. I built basically the studio. I built a studio in my basement here that I can, because we knew we were going to have to start doing stuff online. So I built this out. That took a couple of weeks. Did a lot of things around the house. Now I'm no fix-it man by any stretch, but it's just kind of cool to be home. Now we all want to have games. We want to get back and want to do what we do, but I'm trying to take advantage of it because I know the fire hydrant's about to open up here soon. And when it does, it's going to be extremely busy for an extended period of time. So I'm lucky to have that ability to take a coronavirus vacation, knowing that when sports comes back, we're going to be extremely busy. I know a lot of people aren't so lucky, though, and I think about them, and I'm praying for them every day.
When the NBA does open up, and who knows if we have a regular season or if it's 1-16 and they just do that. I mean, I've heard all kinds of ideas, and I don't know what to believe until I actually see Adam Silver make the announcement and then open gyms. Has the league, have the networks contacted you at all? Do you have any idea what their, what the final four ideas might be, what your role might be?
Oh yeah, I mean, we know we've been kept abreast of the situation every check mark along the way. So there's contingency plans that every league has mapped out all across to the end of when you could last possibly play, baseball and the NBA, which are the two leagues that I'm most involved with right now. So, but there's no answer. So I say that to tell you and everybody else that there are these contingency plans, but it kind of fits in the calendar. So plan A, plan B, that didn't work. We didn't hit that marker. Let's go to plan C. That didn't work. Let's go to plan D. Now that marker's passed. I don't know what plan we're on now, but that's been the way it's gone. So it's always like, okay, if we do this now, we're going to go to spring training and then we'll have games. And that passes. Now, if we come back in this certain way, we're only going to do studio games. So as it stands right now, as we've just finished Memorial Day weekend, I think if baseball comes back, it'll be early July, and we'll probably do games from Miller Park, home games. We'll televise those games in person. We'll do road games from the studio. And we just finished an event, as I mentioned, doing the mats. That was almost a test run. And in the last 2 weeks, we've had live sports on. NBC Golf Channel had one 2 weeks ago. Golf's kind of been the first sport to come back. And then we had one at Turner Sports last week with the mat. So I got a chance to see how you have to abide by the local, the state, the league, your company's protocols. And that all comes from the CDC protocols. So it's totally different, Mike. It's like, it's the same, but the space between everybody's totally different. So in an event where we might have 2 trucks, we had 4. Just so people could spread out, and graphics were in their own truck. Now imagine how expensive that is to start bringing in all this extra stuff to be able to do all these games. So I'm more focused on the broadcasting side and how we can present this. It's no big deal for me to call a game sitting right here, looking at it on my phone. It's not going to be perfect, but I would do that. It's not that really. I mean, look what ESPN's doing with the KBO. So it's more about the crew. And then what happens when somebody tests positive? Because odds are somebody on the crew, on the team, one of the coaching staff is going to test positive. Then what? What's the protocol then? How do you quarantine? Are you asking people to be separated from their families for a really long period of time? and then not be able to work again. You put them in the work environment to work, they get COVID-19, they test positive, you now have to take them out, they can't work, now they can't make an income. And so there's a lot more to it than I think people realize. I know everybody wants to get back, and it's like, I'm hearing the narratives of, the owners are being selfish, the players are being more selfish. It has nothing to do with that. Everybody wants to get back, but we got to make sure we do this responsibly. I mean, these are these people's livelihoods we're talking about.
Yeah, I think everybody looks at the NBA coming back and thinks it's just Giannis, or it's just Chris Middleton, or it's just James Harden, or whoever you root for. And there's so much more to that. And I, a couple of weeks ago, after that first UFC fight, I came to the conclusion in my mind that we're not going to have live sports. And I don't want that. I mean, I'm a huge fan, as you know, Brian. Obviously, you are. It's your livelihood. It's your work. But let's say Aaron Rodgers tests positive on a Friday before the Packers and Vikings open this season. He's been in a locker room with 50 other guys. You have to quarantine all of the Packers. And then let's say that, it happens in 3 other locker rooms. Now, all of a sudden, there's 6 games that are gone. And I feel the same way about the NBA, too. If Giannis tests positive on a Thursday and they're supposed to play on a Sunday, well, you have to quarantine Giannis, or you have to quarantine the whole Bucks locker room. And then what happens, too, if they lie about it? That's what you worry about, too, is, okay, they test positive, but they play anyway. Then what happens if you get on the court and you start spreading it?
Well, and I think they wouldn't necessarily lie from once you get into the athletic training staff. I think the players would be like, I'm not getting a test today. I'm not going in for a test because I can't afford to be negative. That's a sports mentality. That's a player's mentality. But this is not a hamstring injury. This is not an ankle injury. You can't tough it out. So I think that's being discussed, and that wave is being talked about. So then you almost have to bill it as it's a season that's going to have an asterisk no matter what, and the survival of the fittest, and whoever kind of makes it to the end. We certainly can provide more entertainment. A made-for-TV golf event is much more palatable and easier to put on than if you're asking professional golfers to go play in a major right now. I mean, that's going on their permanent record. That's a thing. That's if they win that and there's an asterisk by it. Imagine winning the Masters or a U.S. Open or a PGA Championship and having a big asterisk on there. Well, that was during the coronavirus.
I mean, imagine coming down the 18th.
These things are being discussed.
What about coming down like the 18th at Augusta and there's nobody looking at you, or at the British Open or whatever, and there's no one looking at you? I mean, I've been to my fair share of JV basketball games where the only people in the stands are parents. That's what NBA games are going to feel like with no fans. And I get the feeling, listening to Aaron Donald of the Rams, playing without a crowd, it really I mean, we can listen to the artificial noise they might pump in, but there's an energy that's lacking if there's not 80,000 or 20,000 or 10,000 fans in the stadium.
Well, and I would disagree with that notion, and I know a lot of athletes feel like that would be a problem. I think even Craig Counsell mentioned something about that. In my opinion, though, I think the initial warm-ups, getting onto the field would be different, but I think once the competition starts, football players, they practice all the time with no fans. Baseball players, once you get into it, it might actually be good for television because we're going to hear everything, and that could be fascinating. And so what I noticed this past weekend at this golf event is that there was no fans. I mean, they didn't let anybody on there, and they got some pretty high-priced and powerful members that wanted to be a part of it. Nobody could walk in this place. So there was nobody there other than the people who were actually working. And it really created kind of an intimate feel where I didn't think the competition suffered at all. I think all the competitors were into it. I think the same thing would happen in baseball. You're going to have some interesting conversations. Craig Counsell made a good point. It's going to be like being on a movie set. But once the games start, those guys have such tunnel vision anyway. It actually could be in our benefit from television perspective, from a viewer perspective, because you're going to hear so much more than you've ever heard. Now, the players have got to be cautious. We're probably going to have to put a 10-second delay on, just like we did last weekend. Like we're going to have to do something, but it could be incredible. And I do think it's going to be the beginning of a whole new era of televising sports. I think we've already gotten there. I think players are starting to understand this more, that they've had their sports taken away from them. So I'm trying to be positive about it, and I really do feel like it's going to spur something that's going to make viewing sports a much better and different experience moving forward.
I can just picture those conversations that Jake Taylor had with people at the plate in the movie Major League and some of the things. I'm like, I don't think it's supposed to go over the airwaves for the rest of us to hear. I think that the match proved that it can work. And I think the UFC fight a couple of weeks ago, the first one, proved that it can work. What was the weekend like for you? I mean, actually, how about this? When it's pouring buckets 20 minutes before the match was supposed to begin, was there part of you that you're thinking, man, 2020 is the worst. We can't even get this thing going.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, but honestly, being around golf as much as I have, and, before I came to the Brewers, I worked at the Golf Channel, and, that the first thing you look for on the radar is electricity or lightning. And there was none. It was just buckets. It was just rain. And so that was pretty simple to get to the point where, okay, it's just going to rain, and it's going to rain hard, but there's no lightning, there's no danger, it's warm. I never really thought we weren't going to play. It was kind of up to the competitors. And I give Peyton Manning a lot of credit, because we were in the rain room in the men's locker room, essentially, which is like a bigger area. It's got a grill and everything. That was our rain room where we were staging, where we would come on the air in case our booth, because our booth was open air. We ended up doing it all from the booth, but, that was our contingency. And so we're sitting there with all those guys, the staff, the superintendent, the 4 competitors, the 4 legends. And Peyton Manning walks in there like, all right, boys, we're going to get wet today. And, this is going to be great. And I think he kind of set the tone. It's like, yeah, this is for charity. We're going to raise a lot of money. All the conditions are the same. We're going to figure out how to stay dry and compete. And we're going to compete. We're going to put on a show. And I think that's the kind of spirit that all sports should take. And I know Manning and his career and what he's done, obviously it doesn't count for anything. This was for charity, but those guys don't want to be embarrassed either. And they wanted to compete. And so they went out there and they competed in the rain, and it almost became comical. And as I said at the end, it's like, would you rather flip through the channels and see Peyton Manning and Tom Brady and Woods and Mickelson in the downpour, or would you rather see him on a beautiful sunny day playing golf? I mean, actually, I think I want to see him in a downpour. I want to see that traffic accident. So that's what it turned out to be. It was a technological masterpiece to pull that off. It was a miracle that we were able to pull that off. Our crew, our audio techs, the camera guys, everybody who was involved with all the RF, all the wireless stuff, it was amazing. I would say 5 years ago, we would not have been able to pull that off. The equipment's getting better. It's getting more durable, smaller, coverable. It was awesome. It was something really cool. I think, for me, it kind of felt like an extra inning game when you're in like the 15th inning and most people go, wow, you must be in a bad mood. Heck no, man. Those are the games you're like, all right, if we're going to play 15, we might as well play 20 and make some history. So that's kind of where we all were with the match. And kudos to the competitors. They took the lead on that. They said, we're going, put on some rain gloves, and we're doing this. So, and we did it, and it was great.
And those 15-inning, 20-inning games, they always seem to happen in Los Angeles and San Francisco and Seattle, and Brewers fans want to go to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Who was having the least fun? Could you tell that anybody just hated being out there in the rain, whether it was one of the competitors or somebody on your team?
No, I didn't think so at all. I mean, Brady was not playing well, and he was mad. He had the burn going. His game, it was just like his
Is he
swing.
really an 8 handicap? Because he didn't.
Well, I mean,
8 handicap.
He is. He's a good player, really good player. Matter of fact, most people that have played with Manning and Brady, and there are a handful of people, a lot of former NFL guys and current NFL guys that have played with both. They show way better. And Manning would even admit that he hasn't been as good as Brady. Now, Manning's been retired for 5 years. Brady, as he very loudly pointed out to us, he's trying to win a Super Bowl this year. So he's been training and throwing, and he was still doing some of his football training prior to the event Sunday. I mean, he was out there doing like some different kind of stretches and exercises he does. I don't know what it is, and Charles saw him and talked to him about it a little bit, but he has a regimen that he's on, and that was the time to do it. And it's also a warm-up routine. So, no, I think he was miserable at his golf, but he wasn't miserable at being there. And then he turned it around. He holed out at 7, and it just changed everything. And all of our camera guys, that you felt bad for them, but they've all done golf in the rain, and it just became kind of funny at one point. I mean, everybody would rather have sunny skies. The only thing we missed there was the blimp. So the blimp couldn't fly. We had the Goodyear blimp. And
yeah, what was the whole point of the broadcast if there's no blimp?
Yeah, no blimp. The blimp would have added some really cool elements to what we were doing to be able to shoot overhead. So, but that was really it. I mean, everything else, just everybody toughed it out and sucked it up, and we just did it.
Afterwards, do you sit around with the guys? Do more guys tell stories? Does Tiger bolt? What happens at the night? Is there a 19th hole?
Yeah, for sure. And we were invited, the television crew, to go to the clubhouse with them, and the people that are there, their agents are all there. Their their handlers, the people that are responsible for whatever they have to do next, and all the club staff, the general manager, the president, superintendent, some of his crew. And I'm sure it was great. We declined the offer because I just felt like that was their time. They were the celebrities. They were the stars. We had been there for so long. We had been rehearsing days before, had to go through all these different holes. I mean, you get to into something like that as a TV crew, you just want to go home, to be honest with you. And I would have loved to have sat around with those 4 players and told stories, but there's enough people there that, as I said, there's enough people with their finger in the pie in that event. Now, because it was such a success, you're starting to see a bunch of whole hands go into that pie. And so I think we were just kind of like, I'm not necessarily in on that. So we'll let them have their fun. And that was a moment for them. We appreciated the invitation. That was awesome. And I certainly would love to sit around and tell stories, but we had talked to those guys so much the days leading up to Friday practice round. Saturday, we did a rehearsal with them, full rehearsal with earpieces and microphones, and we went out on the course and followed and talked to them. Like they've had enough of us at that point, but they did get together and have a good time telling stories. I know JT went. Justin Thomas went to that, and he said it was great, and it went to the wee hours. So I'm sure they were all pretty gassed.
I thought it was just cool at one point where he comes up to Mickelson and feels like, all right, here's what I'm going to do. I want to hit the ball here. I have a short line. And he did it. Like everything. Yeah. We don't do that. I'm like, let's see. I just want to hit the ball and make sure it goes up in the air. Maybe. Meanwhile, it feels like I want to hit it, have it land here and stop here. And then he went ahead and did it in a pouring rainstorm. Like I thought that was a really cool element. Now we won't see that, I don't think, when we get back to the regular PGA Tour. But those are the kind of things I think that we're learning that can be done in this new time.
Yeah, and I think we could see that on the PGA Tour if they will allow us to do that. And I say that, Mike, because when I was at Golf Channel and we had the rights to the Canadian Tour, we had a blank palette. We could do whatever we wanted, and we did things. We mic'd players. We put heart rate monitors on them. And the technology wasn't as advanced as it is now. The mics were bulky and big packs on their back that they put on their belt. But I'll never forget one event in Canada. I think it was in Victoria, BC. John Mills, who had a brief time on the PGA Tour, but as he was coming up, he wore a microphone for us. He talked us through every shot. And all we did was ask him, like, if you could just think out loud, whenever you're comfortable, that would be great. And he did. And it was amazing. And you could go back to the tape from 2004 and you would watch this Canadian Tour event where we're doing walk and talks. First of all, we had actual competitors after their, you tee off in golf, there's a morning wave and an afternoon wave. We would have actual competitors from the morning wave come join our broadcast as on-course announcers in the afternoon wave. Guys like Mario Tiziani, who is Steve Stricker's brother-in-law and now his agent. He would do that. And we would do walk and talks with these players. So we were the tree that falls in the forest, though. Like it's the Canadian Tour. It's not Mickelson and Woods. It's not Brady and Manning, but it was these young up and coming mini tour players essentially. And they were willing to do it. And we did it. We've done all this before. I've seen it. I've experienced it. So doing the match Sunday felt no different other than the massive audience. I mean, we would have 100,000 people watch a Canadian Tour event. We had 6 million watch the match. So big difference in audience and personality, but the point is the same. The technology's ready. As announcers, we're ready to shut up whenever we can get players talking. That's like no announcer wants to talk over players, but very few players actually talk. So if we can convince the players to wear the mics and be more interactive, and no, you're not doing that for Brian Anderson and TNT. You're doing that for millions of fans. It can work. I've seen it work. And that was 18, 17 years ago. It works.
Where does this one rank when you look back so far in your broadcast career? You were the front man for the most watched cable golf event in television history. I mean, I know it was an exhibition. I know it was for charity, and I know it was a retired NFL player and Tom, but that's got to rank pretty high up there, I would imagine, when Brian Anderson looks back at his resume.
Yeah, it's cool. It's great to be a part of. And again, I do want to say, the only reason I was in that chair is because Ernie Johnson chose not to be. Ernie has a son who's on a ventilator. He's got muscular dystrophy, and he can't breathe without the ventilator for the last 6 years. So he made the choice not to be. That's why they asked me if I would do it, knowing my golf background, and I was happy to do it. So yes, it goes up there as one of the coolest things I've ever been a part of. I mean, right up there with the NCAA tournament and obviously the MLB postseason, NBA playoffs. It's great. It's fun, but I wouldn't have been there without Ernie Johnson basically saying, let BA do it. I need to be home with my family. And so we're all having to make tough decisions about our jobs. And I mean, look at you, like you're working out of your house, you're raising three babies. I mean, we're all making hopefully better decisions that puts family first, as opposed to what we've kind of been, which is always the capitalist notion of career, and you got to push and go hard. And, we're losing something there. So I give Ernie a lot of credit, and I was happy to step in. My wife has an autoimmune disease, so I was very nervous about that. But all of the protocols that they told me about and how this was going to go down, I felt perfectly safe, and it went down exactly like that. So it was a great thing to be a part of. It could have been a nightmare, and it was starting to trend like a nightmare when I tried to talk to Tiger, and he couldn't hear me. And that was like the first thing we did, right when we get on the air, and he's just staring out of his cart. I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be a wild ride. So I think we took a bunch of chances. We tried to do it a lot differently than anybody's ever seen. We put cameras in golf carts. We had the handheld guys. There were no towers built. There wasn't one tower built on that golf course. So we tried to get low and intimate, and that's kind of how we thought it would work. And if the technology worked, that's the way it was going to happen, and it did for the most part, minus a few glitches. But really proud of Turner Sports, Warner Media, just proud of our effort to actually present something to fans that they could enjoy and be entertained by, in the heaviness of all that's going on right now.
What is the biggest moment or the most memorable? I mean, I still have all your sound bites when I was working at the Fan in Milwaukee, and my favorite is when Ryan Braun hit a home run and your voice cracked midway through. Like I have that, I still have that in my ear at all times. Did you call Halliday's no-hitter in the playoffs for the Phillies? Because I remember watching, like, BA just called a no-hitter. I think you called Justin Verlander's in 2007 against the Brewers.
I did.
You called that one too. Like what's the top moment of your broadcast career, do you think?
Well, I don't know about the top. I mean, it's like your kids. And so there's been moments like Pillars, and those are the three you just mentioned are all on that list. Even though Verlander's no-hitter was against the Brewers, but anytime you see a no-hitter and it's a player like Verlander, who's, going to be a Hall of Famer, that's important. Ernie Harwell signed my scorecard that day, by the way. That's what makes that special.
Wow, nicest man I have ever met in my life.
Yeah. He was the first guy that called me when I got the Brewers job. It was like hearing from the Pope. But he came on the air with us that day. He was retired from the Tigers. But yeah, the Braun, there's been a number of Braun calls because he's so legendary in his clutch moments, and he keeps adding to that list. There's probably 4 or 5 Braun moments alone that are on that list. Certainly Benintendi's catch. Red Sox Astros 2018, Benintendi won a game, basically diving catch to end the game. The Astros would have either tied or taken the lead had it gotten down. He robbed Bregman. That was really cool. Steph Curry scored 17 points in an overtime period, 5-minute overtime, 17 points to win a playoff game. That was up there. The no-hitter from Halliday, certainly. And there's a bunch of moments from the match that will certainly go on that list. I love the interaction piece and the entertainment piece, and like being involved in the Brady hole out and Phil Mickelson driving the green, and those are all really, really cool moments. So off the top of my head, those would be the ones that pop up right away.
I hope we get a baseball season, but even before COVID hit, you would have thought Brewers fans were watching the disassembling of a Brewers roster and the destruction of a franchise.
Yeah.
Your take on the moves the Brewers did make going into what we thought was going to be the 2020 season?
Well, I was really impressed, and I was kind of shocked to hear I don't want to say backlash is probably too strong, but it was a level of concern on sports talk radio with Brewers fans. I remember going to the On Deck event in January, and it kind of took me by surprise. Like, wow, what are we doing? What are we doing with our pitching staff? And I was just the opposite. I've never been so far separated from like fan perception and what I feel is the real truth. Normally, I'm usually in pretty much alignment, but I was way separated from what most fans are thinking. I think a lot of the baseball experts saying the Brewers had a terrible offseason. That led into a lot of sports talk show fodder, which then obviously feeds to the fan perception. But for me, I thought they did a great job. I thought Urias was huge. That was a major piece in an acquisition. Luis Urias coming from the Padres. That was part of the Zach Davies deal, Trent Grisham. And I thought that was key. I think this guy's a stud. And I heard from so many scouts, including my brother, who's a scout with the Texas Rangers, after these moves were made, like, man, you guys are killing this thing. And I agree. So Urias was big. I like Justin Smoak in a comeback. I really do think Miller Park is perfectly suited for him. I think he's going to be in a platoon, favorable matchups. He's going to platoon with Ryan Braun. I like Narvaez behind the plate. He was the other guy that came over in that trade. Kind of, he's a left-handed bat that's going to split time with Pena. And then the one I love the most is Avisaíl Garcia. And I don't think people know or understand or respect what he is in his game. This guy is like, he's the poor man's Mike Trout inside the game, and that's saying a lot. He's huge, 6'4", 250, and he's already probably the fastest player on the team. He can play center field. I mean, this guy is like a freak of nature. He's going to strike out a lot, but I think he's moving into his prime. And if you got to like make a bet on somebody like they did with Yelich, I'm not saying Garcia is going to be Yelich, but the same kind of things are setting up. Like when the Brewers decided that Yelich was worth the bet compared to a guy like Ozuna, because remember, they were trading all those guys at that point. I think he's the next one. Avisaíl Garcia. I love this guy. I think he's going to be great for the Brewers. So they added to their pitching. I got nothing but compliments and positive things to say about it. I'm not being a company guy either. I think they're really good. I love their pitching staff, the depth of it. I think Corbin Burns is going to come back and be a factor, even though he's like way down, probably 7th or 8th on the depth chart for starting pitchers. I think Woodruff's ready to pop as a stud ace number 1. And they've got all the pieces in between. You got Knebel coming back, Hader. All good, man. You should be excited if you're a Brewers fan. I love where they are.
Considering the name change coming in 2021, and who knows what the season's going to look like, will we ever see a full Miller Park ever again, do you think?
Oh, good question. I don't think so. I mean, there's not going to be fans this year. So the name change is coming. So, yeah, the days of a packed Miller Park are probably over. So whatever they're going to name the new park, we'll make the adjustment.
I know you got to get out of here, and I believe I hear one of my 3 babies crying, so I need to get to that. What do you think is more likely? We crown an NBA champion or a World Series champion?
NBA champion now. I think a World Series champion is not such a shock, though. Wouldn't be such a shock. I think the Bucks I think this is it. I think this is their chance.
Do you think that we call them
like
Bucks in the NBA Eastern Conference Finals or whatever we call
it?
Will Brian Anderson get that call?
That would be Marv Albert. He's got the conference finals. So don't forget he's the voice of the NBA. But no, I hope to call playoff games in the NBA. If they come back, they're talking about Orlando or whatever it's going to be, we'll be in a studio. I'm confident. Well, I shouldn't say that. I don't know for sure. I feel like it's trending toward calling it in a studio. So I don't know. I don't know. I won't do the conference finals for sure. I would probably be involved in the early rounds, me, Kevin Harlan, Ian Eagle, and then of course at the top is Marv Albert. So we're all just waiting on our assignments. So we'll see what happens. If not, they got enough guys to cover the NBA. I'll be more than happy to do the Brewers. And remember, TBS has the MLB on Sundays. The first Sunday was supposed to be July 5th. So that, we're in the TBS MLB Sunday window. So I'll be doing those as well. So it's going to be busy, man, but hopefully we can get sports back. I hope it happens.
One of the busiest men in all of sports media, Brian Anderson. Thank you so much for the time, man. I appreciate it. Continued success. Stay safe, you and your family, and hopefully we'll see you calling baseball and basketball games in the near future. Thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, happy to do it, man. Good luck with you and the kids. One of them's up. You better go get one in. I'm going to go empty the dishwasher. This is our life now.
What has happened to us, BA?
We used to be cool guys, man.
Oh, goodness.
Everybody, not anymore.
Hey,
go get
them,
again.
Mike. See you later, Brian.
See you later.
Hey, thanks to Brian Anderson for joining me. What a dude. I mean, that guy could probably sit and tell stories until – I mean, it's crazy to think that when he first got to Milwaukee, so many people were like, who's the Golf Channel guy? Who's taking over in my Brewers booth? And who is this guy? He's boring. He's a golf guy. And Brian Anderson is one of the most respected play-by-play men in all of television broadcasting. And it's so cool that he was able to carve out some time. And I imagine he's going a little stir-crazy, not having a lot to do ever since the NBA and the NCAA tournament got shut down. And that's what he normally does until he comes and calls Brewers baseball. So thanks to Brian Anderson for coming on the podcast. I appreciate that. All right, so I need to bring up something. If you're a Packers fan, that I happened to come across, and maybe you saw it on my Facebook page, facebook.com/Mike Wickett Podcasts. And that is the story of A.J. Dillon. Have you seen the running back that they drafted out of Boston College? And I know that the pick didn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but if you look at the way that the team is changing, and I know maybe you don't like the change, maybe you're not embracing the change, maybe you're watching what the Chiefs are doing and they're throwing the ball all around, and you're saying to yourself, well, why are my Packers transitioning to a power offense? What's going on here? That's the way Matt LaFleur wants to do things. I mean, think about Tennessee this year. They got to the AFC title game. Now, they didn't have much of a chance against the Chiefs, even though they had, I think, a 10-point lead in the second quarter, something like that. But I think what you're seeing is this transition to a power offense and not as much throw that you saw under Mike McCarthy. And A.J. Dillon, I believe, was a huge sign of that, of things to come. I don't think A.J. Dillon gets 1,000 yards this year or does anything wild, barring injury, of course. Aaron Jones is still the man, and I think he was the MVP of the team last year. But I think what you're going to see is Aaron Jones is not going to get a massive payday by the Green Bay Packers. Running backs just don't get massive paydays in the National Football League. And A.J. Dillon is a guy that I'm not going to say he's Derrick Henry, but he sure looks a lot like Derrick Henry, doesn't he? 6 foot, 247. And if you saw the story that I posted on the Facebook page from WBAY TV2, he looks yoked, just yoked. I mean, he is a beast. And he, I think, at the time, was the only rookie that was already in Green Bay and was already training for this offseason that is so weird, and we don't know anything that's going on, and nobody knows anything about if there's going to be a season, how much of a season, are you going to be allowed to go to Lambeau Field and actually sit in the cathedral and watch the Packers play? I have no idea. But this dude is preparing as if there is going to be a season. And if you go back and watch tape on this guy, and you can find it on YouTube, you can find it anywhere, and I understand what a mixtape can be. Heck, I could take me on the golf course, hitting a couple of good drives, piece them together, throw some hip music behind it, and all of a sudden, if I put it up on YouTube, some people think I'm a credible golfer. Not true. Don't believe everything you see on YouTube. But that being said, when you watch film on a guy like A.J. Dillon, you see that he is one of those running backs that is so hard to bring down, like Derrick Henry. Some of these other big bruising backs that you definitely don't want to tackle. And I'm not putting him in Henry's category. I'm not saying he's going to lead the league in rushing, or he's Jerome Bettis, or he's going to be a Hall of Fame running back and win Super Bowls. I'd love to see that. That'd be great for the Packers. But what I think you're seeing is a guy that they're going to probably feel confident for the next 4 to 5 years after 2020 of making him the feature back. And who knows, maybe he takes carries away from Aaron Jones and he's the change of pace guy. And I don't know what Jamal Williams' future is going to hold. Jamal Williams is a good running back, but if they decided to go with Jones and the rookie, if he proves to be worthy of being the number 2 in training camp, if we ever even get a training camp, then I wouldn't be surprised if Jamal Williams is one of those surprise cuts that we see. And this bruiser, along with the changes you're seeing, they drafted the tight end who's going to be a bigger threat in the passing game. I really feel like the one thing Packers fans didn't like about Jordan Love and A.J. Dillon and the tight end whose name I can't pronounce correctly yet, but I will, I promise you, out of Cincinnati, you're seeing a more power ball-controlled offense, which you may not have ever seen under Mike McCarthy, and maybe you don't like that, but that, I think, is what it signified. And the dude is absolutely yoked. This running back, he looks massive. Most running backs, most NFL players do, but seeing some of the videos of this dude in training and the pictures of him in his workout gear, yikes. He's a big dude. He is definitely a big dude. So I'm excited about A.J. Dillon, I have to tell you. Thanks to Brian Anderson. Thank you so much for checking out another episode of Wickett on Wisconsin. We'll do it again coming up next week. We'll have some more Packers talk. Got a special guest lined up for you, breaking down a lot of film and a lot more about these changes you're seeing, because there were things that Aaron Rodgers failed with last year, and there were things that Devontae Adams failed with last year, but you expect those guys to make jumps from year 1 to year 2 and clean some of those messes up under new head coach Matt LaFleur. So we'll do that coming up next week. Don't forget, tell a Packers fan, tell a Bucks fan, tell a Brewers fan that we are on Spotify, we're on Apple, we're on Google Podcasts. We are wherever you get your podcast. Thanks for listening to Wickett on Wisconsin with me, Mike Wickett. As always, go Pack, go Bucks, and go Brewers. Thanks for listening to Wickett on Wisconsin. If you have any feedback or you want to reach out to the show, you can find me on Facebook, Mike Wickett Podcasts, or you can email MikeWickettPodcasts@gmail.com. And you can find me on Instagram and Twitter @MikeWickett. Thanks to Silverman Sound Studios for providing the music for today's show. And you can find us anywhere you find your podcasts, including Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Until next week, thanks for listening to Wickett on Wisconsin.